Muzzle training is a great skill to teach any dog. The first step we want to do is make sure that the muzzle creates good feelings in your dog. We don't want the muzzle to be something scary, and we don't want it to be something your dog finds worrying. So here we are starting with one approach where we can put the muzzle on the ground and just put some treats around it so they get used to this often very strange looking thing. The other approach we can take is to grab the muzzle, put some treats into the muzzle in our cupped hand and offer our dog the treats. We're never going to push the muzzle onto our dog's face. It's always going to be that they are going to put their mouth into that muzzle to get those tasty treats. We want this to be a good thing. So we would practice quite a few sessions of just creating those good feelings for your dog. Step 2 is all about getting them used to putting that face in the muzzle. So when I'm training this, I like to use something like Premier cheese. It makes it a bit easier for my dog to get the reward, and it makes it a bit easier for me to use. I am offering him the muzzle and using the Premier cheese to sort of guide his nose into it, and then I'm rewarding him with quite a nice funnel of cheese for putting his nose in. As long as his nose is in, he is getting cheese. I might have a tiny gap in between just to introduce the idea consistently that the cheese is not always in front of his nose, but he's almost constantly getting a supply of that cheese to create those good feelings to help us with the next step. You can see Arkle is quite used to this, so he's not trying to get his head out or anything. If I had a dog who was backing out, I would just feed more, feed faster, but I would let them back out. You can also see I have not strapped the muzzle around his face because I want these early stages to be successful. I don't want him panicking and getting it off his face because that can feel unusual. When we have done lots of sessions of step 2 with lots of success, we can start to try and increase the time between each treat or each lick of the Premier cheese they are getting. So here Arkle is getting a tiny little gap starting to be built up between those squeezes of cheese. I'm sort of moving the muzzle, moving the cheese even, away from him and then bringing it back. Initially in very quick bursts, and then I start to increase the time between each piece of cheese that he's licking. So that he's starting to get used to the idea he can keep it on his face for a longer period of time. Again, if you are struggling, this would be done over several sessions. It should be, but if he was struggling, I would just make the licks of the cheese quicker again. I wouldn't push him to the point that he's learning to take his face out repeatedly. And we can see that he is enjoying this. He's not trying to get his face out at any point, which means I'm right to be increasing that duration. But I would not try and increase it hugely in one session. I would do this over lots and lots of small sessions. Small little successes are the key to muzzle training. Good boy. Step 4 is where things can get trickier for some dogs. This is where we start to strap the muzzle around their face. When I go to this step, what I do is I start to feed quicker again because my dog may feel a bit trapped as it may feel a little bit closer on their face. So you can see that I've increased the pace of those treats very quickly again. But then as quickly as I've increased that pace, I will probably start to decrease that pace again so that he doesn't fall into the trap of needing constant supply of cheese. But we can see here that he's got it on, he's getting that nice supply of squeezy cheese, which he really likes. I've got a little gap in between again, and I would only do this again in really short bursts before I were to unclip the muzzle and sort of repeat it. This can be a tricky step, so take it at the pace your dog can handle it. Step 5 is all about starting to add some movement with that muzzle. I know many dogs who are really, really good when they are stood still and the food is coming, and then they go out for a walk and that's where it becomes a problem. And that's just because we haven't got the dog used to moving around the house with the muzzle on. So what I like to do is introduce some of the fun games my dog likes to play while they're in the muzzle. So here he's doing some sits and some touches, which he quite likes. But then what I like to start to do is move around the house with it. So I will get up and I will start to use the treat or the Primula cheese to sort of guide them and get them moving and reward them at a really good pace, which is what you will see in a moment. When I'm doing this, the goal is just that they're having fun. I don't want the muzzle to be something they find really awkward. When we start this with a lot of dogs, they might try and paw at their face, and it might mean that I'm just squeezing the cheese to the muzzle and moving it so they can't even think about pawing at their face. But I would keep these sessions again really short, really sweet. I'm sort of doing a bit here where he's following it next to my leg. We could always add their walking equipment so it becomes more like a walk to make that transition into real life a little bit easier. So we tend to get our muzzles from the muzzle shop here in the UK. Arkle has a couple of options he could wear. The first is the Whippet Muzzle 103. He just tends to find this uncomfortable. He can't quite get his treats as easily, and he's just, as an individual, does not like it that much. He is a bit of a particular dog, and that's fine, so we just use a different muzzle. Here we are using the lightweight running basket muzzle 110, and this is a bit bigger, it is a bit longer, and it just means there's bigger gaps to get the treats into. He actually much prefers this, even though it is a bit bigger on his face.